We're, we're here together, having just had a round of conversation tied to the Judaism Unbound podcast and thoughts about how to work with the energy that that very successful initiative has brought forth. And what strikes me is how closely the conversation inside of that space, which I'm very new to, around a transition in eras in Judaism, and how does Judaism become truly relevant and meaningful, and you know, re-embrace the essential value that's been there all along, but somehow has been lost for so many of us, certainly for me. That question, and the fact that, in fact, when you ask that question and go looking, as they have in the podcast, there's all of this amazing stuff happening. Initiatives of all different kinds, and people thinking and writing, and you discover when you go looking for it that this paradigm shift in Judaism is everywhere. And it really strikes me how closely that maps some of the conversations I've been in that have to do more with paradigms of economics, or social structures, or dialogue, or governance, or how we run our organizations, that connect to broader themes that patriarchy and command and control, power over versus power with, all this stuff. So it was so seamless to step into this sort of micro context and have our conversation. And in particular, the idea that you can have this safe conversation within a group, and it's one kind of a thing, and we need that. And we also are embedded in a larger world that's much more complex and challenging, but also has opportunities we want to engage in. And how do we find the balance? How do we even find good language to think about what those two different spaces are that isn't sort of oversimplifying and reductive? Was really a good part of this for me. Complete.
I think one of the ideas that really came up in our conversations that seemed resonant with all of us was this idea that in order to be fully engaged with trying to work towards the problems that we're seeing in the world around us, that we have to be able to take some time, space, community, and connect with people who are able and want to sort of get out of the fray, think together, and then sort of go back in, and that there's something empowering about taking that time out. For me, what I'm reflecting on is that when we're talking about Judaism, I feel very comfortable with the process of chaos and emergence out of chaos, perhaps because in some way I see the stakes as being low, which is a problem, and I actually think the stakes are higher than I feel. But I think maybe I feel that Judaism is already so not working that there can only be a positive from fixing it, whereas with the world I feel more scared about the stakes being very high of not finding a solution. And so in that sense, I agree that the pieces are that the questions are resonant, and I wonder if actually working on the problem of Judaism, which feels more solvable, might actually give us some sense of optimism about being able to work on the larger problems as well.
I was struck by two things. On the meta level, I'm reflecting how the four of us that convened here with Ben, know each other in some ways well, relatively speaking, in some ways really well. And yet I felt, I heard things from each of us that I don't think I would have heard, would have been very hard to hear if they would ever happen at all in other contexts, and are so valuable, right? So My America was a mirage, Dan saying, and Wendy saying, expressing her kind of new hope, and just many, many things. So this time to go deeper with each other and bring more into our collective action, right, was stunning and very quick, right? And then I think for me, the second thing is how this, as Dan just said it, working on Judaism as a means to working on the much bigger, utterly fucking terrifying reality of some sort of tides that, social tides that we're experiencing. Makes me, and then seeing, because we summoned it a few times, that actually Judaism, as the reason we are drawn to it, and it is working for each of us, at least to the extent that it's captured a bunch of our elapsed time in life, right? We've each spent bunches of a strand of our lives, at least, in Jewish endeavor, and that we're getting great meaning out of working on its future with each other. So, yeah, done.
I'd like to go next, and then I'm going to have to pop out. I found an energy percolating in me in this conversation, so I really appreciate SD of gathering us together, Ben for creating it. And it is, for me, it's the mirror that I want to reflect back into the broader population, that alone I feel isolated, like I can't do anything. But in communal spaces, I recognize, oh, I don't have to do this by myself. Especially, I don't know how to do it anyways, but that together there's more than 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It equals much more. And that recognizing that if I bring my full self and my peace, that it'll connect up with somebody else's full self and their peace, and together we'll create opportunities that we couldn't have seen individually. And so I just see this as a microcosm of what we all really want for the world, and what we want for Judaism. And I very quickly was there and was like kind of surprised at it, but in a way not surprised. So I'm done.
Okay, Greg, it's your turn. Sunglasses are off. Sunglasses are off.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're a little warbly, but we'll forgive you.
Okay, well, it's the best I can do. Hang on, let me turn off the fan of the car. That may or may not help the sound. So I guess for me, I had a few experiences on the call. One is I've had, ever since I learned about the Roman Empire as a kid, I figured out that they had a lot of democracy and cool stuff, which became a dictatorship. I've always feared that, and sort of hearing the Harry Seldon analogies and the Wile E. Coyote really touched a pretty broad voice to a lot of deep-seated fears that I have about where we are, and I'm still processing that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk with my hands while I'm holding the phone. I realize that will be kind of jiggly. But at the same time, shoot, I lost. I think that there are a lot of powerful threads that I've taken away about having healing spaces for whatever may or may not be happening in the outside world, having a healing space, and then also being very inviting. It could be Abraham with an open-sided tent to really invite other people to come experience the healing and to become healers themselves. there's this phrase that we can be a light unto nations, and if we can bring healing within the Jewish community, that we can bring healing within the divide that we're experiencing, that can be a model for others, because I think ultimately we're suffering from a spiritual sickness of a lack of respect for one another. And in my opinion, that is the root cause for all of the other issues that we're facing right now. That's what I got. You still there, or did I drop?
No, we're all waving our fingers at you, and Dan is smiling, and of course you can't see any of it because you're on the road. I mean, your eyes are appropriately on the road. Yeah, it's the jazz hands, Dan. You got to wiggle your fingers.
Okay, good. Well, just throw me a verbal bone then.
I thought it was the deaf clapping.
Yeah. Okay.
Remute.
So should I stop recording now, or will?
Unless anyone has an additional reflection they want to add before we do.
I'm gonna stop.
That so many more Jews are capable of being in the quote elite of Jewish creativity than ever were before, and at the same time, there's this recognition that of this huge group of people, most of whom are not Jews by sort of genetic descent. But one of the questions is like, what about to the extent that we expand the notion of who is a Jew, that basically, as I advocate for, that it's basically becomes a choice, that you can imagine, anybody could be a Jew. And then there is this question of this, on the one hand, we're going to create something that's appealing for elite type people to get their top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs met, but that's not necessarily a service to the world unless we're unless we're somehow either leveraging that for the benefit of the rest of the people, which I would hope that we do, and but it still seems pretty elitist, and or is there a way to, actually be more in mind of the people that are not living there, and whether this work can more immediately serve them in a non-patronizing sort of way. So I think it's just something for us to have in our thinking.
I'm curious if people, other people here were aware of Cory Booker's Rhodes Scholar L'Chaim Society, like his relationship to Judaism and Shmuley. But there's an article, I think it's the Washington Post today, that is astounding to me, right? So he got deeply involved in Jewishness, right, in Judaism, and talks about it that way. And then the second thing in there was how many people from their Rhodes, how many members of Congress and presidents of universities did that Rhodes thing in Oxford, right? Which is a kind of, I don't know, another lens on eliteness, right? But they were really engaged in cultural production in a way. So I don't know. I don't even want to finish that thought at this moment and take the time. But I'll add it to my list of things I'm sending around, because the fact that I was so shocked by the story on the details of it on so many levels.
It's funny, I knew about that at the time because my college roommate was a Rhodes Scholar in that class with Cory, and they're good friends. So I watched that as it was happening.
Okay. So yeah. All right. I won't ask if you have insight
share,
right, on the plot. We can do that. We can do that online, right? Like, yeah. Okay. So Ben, Greg, Dan, Wendy, an abstention.
Things are breaking up a little on my end here.
Yeah. Okay. You look like you're squinting, not breaking up. Just saying. So thank you.
Like,
you're squinting. Yeah, sunshine.
Squinting. Well, I went outside for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'm trying to look tiny your screen. I
So
don't know why the audio is suddenly bad on my end. Is it?
we hear you fine.
It's a little choppy.
I just
And
want
you
to say,
both sound fine to one another?
yeah.
You know what? Maybe I'm not getting a...
I think we
Maybe
can.
that helps if I come back inside.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi wasn't...
I think we can say goodbye.
Just wrap up?
Yeah, as hard as this is like the Havdalah moment.
And then,
We're going back to our weeks, right? So let's summon whichever piece of Havdalah is your favorite sense, and we'll go right. Ben and I will take on what we think should happen next, and you'll keep us in the loop about the harvesting piece is, of course, where my analytical make things happen in the world.
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'll send you an email with harvesting links. If you just go to consweet.com, it's there. Just for the links, consciousness deep dive, or at the top of the menu, there's a now what menu, and the harvest page.
Great.
Will show up.
Okay.
But I can send you. There's two different things we can harvest. Well, three ways to harvest. We have the record. So if you can send me the link to that, I'll put that on the YouTube channel. And then there's the written reflections if you want to offer any, and any resources that you want to name. I think we should use them up Unbound up there as a resource. But there may be some particular, probably nice to name a podcast or two that feels especially relevant and say something about why, so that when people see it, they'll be more likely to say, "Oh, I would check that out."
Dan, do you want to take that action of figuring out an episode or two we might contribute?
Yeah, but for like just this general topic, you mean?
For that will give, let me see, Ben, you could answer. I was going to paraphrase or invent. A taste of the Jewish aspect. Ben's point was you drop into this microcosm and here we are. It's like fractal. The full thing is here, right? And it was so easy for him to go from broader to here. If there's a particular two podcasts two episodes?
Only if the spirit moves you, though. It's not, the resource list. It's all optional. We have the recording. This is about this experience ending on its own. Just from a meta level in terms of what we're here, why are we doing this? We're doing this in part to just get a sense of what this process is like and how it might be applied, in other contexts, particularly, for Judaism Unbound in a different iteration of something like this. And so, it's just there's this very interesting challenge about how do you make collective meaning with a large group of people that are having these small conversations stretched out over time. If we're back to the World Cafe, if we're all in one room together, there's a different sense of that. And I can tell you from having done many of those that there's still a sense that we only scratch the surface in that 3 hours, right? So we have a lot of time in an engagement like this, and the resource list is one way that people can go deeper then. If they really want to do a deep dive, right, they can be looking at that and reading things and then calling conversations specifically around that thing that they read or listened to, and then we're going to do another round of the conversation. The point of this is to have, opportunities to do multiple small group rounds that all, build on one another and cross-pollinate ideas. So if you imagine this kind of web of these small group conversations happening over time, they can be sparked by the resource list. The resource list also is an ongoing artifact that the conversation generates as something of value. And then you could also do, and this may happen with this group too, there may be some of us that want to take the resource list and the other forms of the harvest and create some more, accessible and compact artifacts to share, little stories that we want to tell, or a zine, or I don't know what. One of my favorite things that I'm asking people to share is music. If there are any songs or other kinds of music that feel especially resonant to you these days, or that somehow speak to the conversation we're having here, or this larger deep dive, and you want to put those on the resource list, I'll grab, if I can find it on Spotify, I'll also put it on the collaborative playlist that's there. There's lots of fun ways to play, and it's all about how do we not only have a really valid conversation that stands on its own as an experience, but then also have that interconnect with all the other ones to make some collective meaning or a shared experience.
Good. Oh, I will try to think about that.
So for my action, and then I'm making sure that we hang up right. This is like high school where nobody wants to hang up. Dan and I agreed that we were going to mock up a Judaism Unbound version of the new On Being website. So Krista Tippett's thing. So I'm saying this so that Ben can go check that out. And so she has on there this thing about conversations, right? So Dan, I'm flagging for us that there's an inspiration here about the conversations, right? In particular, the concreteness there, right? That should come back, and Ben inviting you into that conversation. Okay. So, bye guys.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right.
Have a great week. Shavua Tov, as we say in Havdalah, right? Bye.
Bye.
Great to meet you, Dan.
Ben, I thought that was great.